So good afternoon. Welcome to this brown bag session. And today we are going to be talking a bit more about the new normal in content marketing. So we know that the coronavirus has run its first course, and we have noticed quite a few changes in a rapidly developing situation. And what we hope to be able to cover today is to be able to notice some of the changes, understand some of the best practices, as well as to be able to better prepare ourselves moving forward. Right. Okay, so today's agenda, we'll be covering three main points. Firstly, content marketing in general and how we relate it to our audiences. Secondly, how audiences and platforms have transformed and changed and evolved due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we will try and end it off with some key takeaways for the new normal in content marketing. So before we go any further, for those of you who have joining us who are not too familiar with the concept of content marketing, here's one definition. So content marketing is defined as a strategic marketing approach that is focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content. Okay. Not only do you put out this content, it is also very important for you to be able to attract and retain a clearly defined audience. Now, most of what we'll be covering today will be talking about how this audience, whom a lot of us marketers, a lot of us business owners thought we understood in the past, have since evolved into different animals altogether. And that's not an exaggeration, okay? But of course, at the end of the day, our content marketing needs to align with our business objectives with the whole purpose of driving profitable customer action. Right, so here are some ways in which audience personas are typically defined, okay? So as marketers, as business owners, we know that our target audiences have certain genders that they go by, certain age ranges, right? They have developed certain interests and hobbies along the way, right? Our target audiences are real people, of course, all right? They're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They have their own particular worries and concerns. Not only that, that all stems from their living environment, right? Are they living with family? Are they living away from family? Do they live with kids? As well as a working environment. About who they are working with, their colleagues, their bosses, their superiors, their clients, and also potentially like a means of transportation. Are they driving? Are they riding on motorbikes? Do they commute via bicycle? Or are they sitting in one place at home? Right? Your target audiences also have a sense of style, a certain tone of voice in which they speak, and an outlook on life. Is it positive, pessimistic? Is it realistic, or as some of them prefer to recognize it as? And they also have people around them who influence their decisions, their friends, their family, and also daily paths and routines, right? With all of that put together. Now, with COVID-19, with the coronavirus, what has changed about your target audience are potentially some of their interests and hobbies, right? So one of the key things out of the bag is the fact that a lot of them are starting to play console games, right? So I think it is there are a few console games that have picked up. Most recently, Among Us, right? That's not really a console game; it's a mobile and desktop game, right? And there's also one more, one on the Nintendo Switch. I can't for the life of me remember what it is, but it is a farming game, right? That also took off, and a lot of people are very proud of what they managed to build, right? So new interests, new hobbies have developed since the coronavirus. Worries and concerns, that goes without saying. Everyone is worried and concerned about not just contracting the virus, right? But also about the prospects for the future with the weakening economy, with political, socio-economic instability, right? There are a lot of more worries and concerns that have transpired since then. Their living environment has also changed. We'll go a bit more into this, especially in terms of the working from home or home-based learning environment, right? With regards to the means of transportation, we also noticed that a lot of people are staying in place, right? They're working from home. They're not moving around quite as much. That, of course, has evolved over time as lockdowns come into place and they open up and they loosen up, right? That is changing as well. Lots of people who used to commute, who used to drive, some of them have sold their cars because they are staying in place. Apart from that, the way that audiences are speaking has changed as well, because this stems from their worries and concerns. This stems from the working and living environment that they're currently in. Um, their outlook on life has changed because they may be a bit more pessimistic, a lot more cautious, not so YOLO anymore, right? And that affects the way that they speak. And we'll go into that in a short while. The friends and family that they are around, that surround them also have changed. They spend a lot more time potentially with the people around them, in terms of the people at home, the people that they live with. These people are not necessarily their family. They could be housemates, roommates as well. Um, and that also changes their entire living environment. And naturally, with all of that, daily paths and routines have evolved from lockdowns all the way down to when lockdowns open up, and now people are trying resuming work with safe distancing measures put in place. Lots has evolved since the start of this year. Right. So as marketers, these questions need to be re-asked, right? First of all, who are your audiences? Have they changed? Um, After a while, it may become apparent that the people you used to be targeting in the past are not so ideal audiences anymore, right? And as for your existing customers, your existing audiences, have their attitudes and behaviors changed as well? Where are they situated? People who used to travel for work probably are not traveling much anymore, right? So it's very important to know where they are situated, especially if the areas that you deliver to are within a certain fixed radius. Also take note of how your audiences are receiving and consuming information, especially on social media. Later on, we'll cover how here in Singapore, TikTok has taken off exponentially during this coronavirus and during the circuit breaker lockdown, right? Also consider how your target audiences are engaging with your brand, with brands, with with competitors on social media. They're forming certain relationships right now. All right, it's no longer in passing. They have a lot more attention, a lot more time on their hands to pay attention to what you're saying, and also they have a lot more time to respond to what and in terms of comments, in terms of reviews. So also take a look at what they are saying about your brand, your competitors, your industry, your product vertical. And more importantly, because the friends and family, the working environment, their living environment has changed. Take note about who they are now listening to about your industry, about your products and your services. Right. So here are some of the key points that researchers, that marketers have noticed since COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic spread. Due to telecommuting that has been put in place because of lockdowns, there's a lot of room for miscommunication, especially because social cues are being reduced, right? Lots of our communication is via body language. And this may lead to certain ambiguity in communication, and that could also lead to some miscommunication as well. So there's a certain level of tension that is currently in the air. And with that, with lockdowns as well, some people feel more in control of their time, depending on how structured, how easy they are, how easily they build structure or set boundaries in their lives. Others who are not so good in their area, not so talented in their area, are potentially unable to separate work from personal life, right? So here in Singapore, we see that a lot of people feel the need to respond to emails, to work calls late at night, especially since they're now working from home. So one of the implications especially for B2B marketers, especially for B2B marketers who are marketing to other businesses, is that they need to know that some of their clients are now redesigning their workflows to accommodate for more independent, more asynchronous tasks that require less simultaneous coordination with other team members. So if your product, if your service is able to facilitate that, to give people the confidence to do more independent, more asynchronous tasks with, from what used to be a massive coordinated team effort, that's where your value lies, right? Another symptom of how the pandemic has affected us is the deprivation of the sense of belonging, right? Humans are social creatures and we need to develop meaningful social connections. So with that sort of social isolation that has come into place, lots of your audiences are experiencing stress, anxiety, frustration, and that leads to the animalistic sort of hostility, right, in the social space. For those audiences who are living with other people, some of them may perceive a certain lack of personal space. They have nowhere to go. They simply cannot escape it. And it feels almost like a prison, right? And overall, the whole loss of structure due to routine changes don't just affect your target audiences emotionally and psychologically, as well as physically. They will also roll over to affect you and how you will potentially market to them and come in with the right message at the right time in the right place. Here in Singapore, during the circuit breaker period, these were some of the top working from home, or WFH, working from home challenges that people in Singapore faced. All right, number one, not having enough tools and resources on hand to perform their jobs. Number two, some of them experience, of course, because Singapore, we all live in rather small apartments, some of them experience some space constraints. And for those of them who were currently quarantined at home with kids, lots of distractions, lots of movement around. And because of that, potentially because of lowered productivity during the day due to distractions, people are also working longer hours. However, it is also interesting to note that although many Singaporeans are working longer hours during the circuit breaker period, 70% of people surveyed said that they are happy to respond to work calls and emails after hours. So there's a bit of a contradicting sort of behavior there as well. One of them, on a more serious note, 1 in 4 survey respondents from a particular survey. You can, by the way, you can refer to any of the links attached at the bottom of the slides for more information. 1 in 4 respondents have reported that they are not in good mental health because of the stress, because of the situation that they're currently in. And there's been a reported 22% increase in family violence. So that's where the hostility is coming in, right? Apart from what is happening at home and internally, this is all manifested as well in online, especially on social media, in terms of increased belligerence, increased aggression, increased displays of intolerance, especially between people who do not share the same opinions on what should be done. This then leads to a display of what we call moralizing behavior, right? Some people know it as social vigilantism. So this sort of moralizing behavior is displayed in the form of superior or condescending attitudes among audiences. And this superior or holier than thou sort of attitude can also compromise this sense of belonging, all right, and contribute further to stress in the community. So some of you may be rather familiar with some of the displays of social vigilantism here in Singapore. You may have seen on social media reports of people who have cited incidences of hoarding. And this particular incident where a couple was seen holding hundreds of eggs, right? Transporting hundreds of eggs was played across social media. They were slammed as hoarders, right? And only much later did did it come to light that this couple was actually a pair of school canteen vendors who were stocking up on eggs because they were facing some quality problems with their supplier. But of course, the damage had already been done, right? But it's good that there are certain publications that picked that up, that corrected that error. Also, you see on social media, especially in social media groups, that people are banding together and sort of driving home the idea that that there's a certain acceptable way to act, all right? And they're also responding quite aggressively, potentially quite angrily towards people who do not feel the same way. So these are just some local examples around the world, and we are not alone in this. Around the world, we also have other examples of incidences like this as well, right? However, on a more positive note, at least for us as marketers, as business owners, some of the working from home arrangements have also contributed to a higher demand in certain product verticals. For example, home office setups. So I'm sure some of you have seen on social media, people putting up photos and videos of them working on ironing boards, right? Because they didn't used to have a working desk at home. So that's quite a comical sight. Working on ironing boards, working, of course, dressed only in the top with working wear and comfortable wear at the bottom. So there's been a bit of a change in terms of demand. So now that people are viewing their homes not just as a place of comfort, a place of rest, but also a place of work, that prompts a surge in demand for home office setups, changing up a certain workspace, creating a more conducive environment in which to do work. So this includes, so we saw a rise in demand for furniture, for home-based furniture, for desks, for monitors, for laptops, and other product verticals as well that saw a surge in demand included things like healthy snacks in terms of something to keep you well-fed throughout the day at home, right? Without having to go out to interact with other people. And of course, there was also a huge surge in demand for food delivery services as well as grocery delivery services. What is interesting to note also is that the coronavirus has done way more than digital transformation officers in companies have managed to do over the past few years, right? It caused a huge surge, a huge rapid surge in adoption of digital platforms, of digital devices, right? So before lockdown, we saw that consumers were spending not about an average of 3.7 hours per day online here in Southeast Asia. During lockdown, that number surged to 4.7 hours per day. And after the lockdowns loosened up, we see that the internet usage, the online usage of users here in Singapore as well as in the region has sunk a little bit, but is still much higher than what it was before lockdown. It is also interesting to note that during the lockdown itself, there were 40 million new internet users introduced to the internet here in Southeast Asia, right? Up to now in 2020. So this is by a Google report. One of the reasons why the internet has been, the internet pickup has been expedited so much during this period is also because quite a lot of people feel that technology usage helps them to cope better with the pandemic, whether it is searching for information, for updates on the developing situation in the market, in the world around them, whether it is seeking solace in entertainment, right, watching videos, playing games, and also, of course, potentially interacting with people whom they have lost physical contact with via chat, via video conferencing as well, right? So that's one of the reasons why the internet has picked up, internet usage has picked up so much during this coronavirus lockdown period, at least here in the region. Another thing that has changed is the platform usage, right? So here in Singapore, it is interesting to note that TikTok, which is a social media platform, has gained ground rapidly between January and July. So here in Singapore, there were 1 million new downloads, and that brings TikTok's user base here in Singapore to 3.4 million users, right? And that potentially allows it to rival the usage of LinkedIn and Twitter here in Singapore. So some companies have managed to respond quickly to this surge in popularity, and also to answer its target audiences, to keep them entertained, to keep them engaged, to spread very key messages. One of these organizations is Lifebuoy, and I believe their agency was Good Stuff, if I'm not wrong. Right. So what they did was they rode on the trend of the hand emoji challenge. So there's a TikTok trend that has been going around, where you show a whole series of the tablet shows a whole series of hand emojis, and you're supposed to dance along it to the beat of the music. What Lifebuoy did was they used that same challenge, right? They did a little spin on it. They created their own series of hand emojis, instead related to the topic of hand washing. So this allowed users to dance along with hand washing steps, proper hand washing steps, to ensure better hygiene. And what they did was they seeded this content among local influencers who were also sitting in place, got them to contribute to a better social cause, improve the awareness of proper hand washing techniques, and potentially sell some hand washing detergent as well, right? So what they did was they did a placement on TikTok. They did an interstitial. They came out with a hashtag, a category page hashtag, right? Do the Lifebuoy SG. And they got influencers to contribute. And we also saw that there were I believe, over 6 million views on these content, right? So the test of an organization, of a business, and of its agencies, of its marketing department, is the ability to respond quickly, tastefully, and effectively in such a short period of time, especially because, and it's especially challenging because the situation is evolving just so rapidly, right? And I think Lifebuoy managed to do quite a good job here on TikTok. Other companies, even though they are in the same vertical, right, are responding quite differently. So, for example, we have GrabMart, which is the grocery delivery arm of Grab. They were expanding rather rapidly during this period of time into 8 Southeast Asian countries. And on the other hand, RedMart, which is under Lazada now, RedMart started to limit orders to a certain amount. I believe it's 35 items per order, just so that they can cope with the demand, so they can combat hoarding, and of course, potentially ease up their operations as well. So just because a client, right, a client of yours or a client base of yours is in a particular sector, doesn't necessarily mean that they are coping with demand in the same way, right? So that's one thing to note as well for B2B marketers. Right. Another thing to note for B2B marketers, especially those dealing with physical products like furniture, like office setups, is how the working environment is going to change, right? So Mr. Leong Chi Tung, the CEO of Engage Rocket, which is a HR startup here in Singapore, noticed that, observed that there's potentially a change in an evolution, right, in office spaces. So what used to be an open concept or cubicle-based sort of format where office workers come in, sit down, and perform their daily tasks is potentially going to change into something that is more fit for purpose, right? To facilitate collaborative work, potentially for shorter periods of time, potentially being more flexible to size up and down according to lockdown or according to social distancing limitations, right? To facilitate social interactions in a controlled environment. And another important thing to note is that the workplace is no longer limited to your office space anymore. It will potentially start extending into the home, potentially through technology, right? And if your organization is able to offer a mix of hardware, of software, to enable this extension of work from the workplace into the home, you're in a good standing. And as content marketers, it is also probably important to try and communicate how our products, how services are able to bridge that gap between the workplace and the home through technology. So other interesting things to note in terms of changes in company behaviors include trying to understand how individual roles in small and medium enterprises have developed, right? So especially here in Singapore, there's the whole bao gao liao, right? Whole bao gao liao, or one leg kicks, or sort of concept where employees handle multi-dimensional roles. They they have multiple job scopes, some of which are potentially feasible for work from home arrangements, some of which are not. And this causes some form of stretch, right? So it is important to understand how, for B2B marketers, it's important to understand how organizations work, how your clients' organizations work, and how your products and services can be seen as potential solutions to bridging that gap, and to try and hit this group of people who have seemingly fallen through the cracks, right? Um, as part of our marketing content, it is also important to address some of the challenges that our audiences are facing in reduced or at least or maybe even a complete lack of access to physical offices, which have historically served the purpose of, like we mentioned earlier, interaction, social interaction. Office spaces here in Asia, at least, are also potentially seen as a badge of honor, having an office in the CBD. And that has also potentially been removed, right? Because everyone is working from a work from home setting with a work from home backdrop. There's also, on a more psychological level, there's also the purpose that office spaces used to serve, which is to build trust between customers and the organization, as well as employees and the organization. Without that physical space to interact in, to go to, if there's any challenges that they're facing, there is potentially a bit of a reduced level of trust, and we need to address that in our content marketing. Another thing to note as marketers is that a lot of organizations are tightening their belts, right? Especially if weakened market demand, potentially, and potentially continued heavy overheads despite stimulus grants by the governments, right? There's potentially some belt tightening going on. So your prices, your pricing models, your billing models may have to adapt to the needs of the market so that you can stay relevant. Of course, there's also the potential situation where some of your clients are unable to adapt quickly to digitization efforts. Some people are still struggling with remote working arrangements. Some people who had been struggling with remote working arrangements, who finally got into the groove of it, have now been thrust back into work, right? So this causes panic. This causes potentially a drop in revenue because they are unable to adapt to the demand online, to translate the purchase cycle, to translate the purchase process online, and potentially some of it may lead to company closures as well. So as marketers, we need to be prepared for this. And what we can do is to structure our content to help our client companies, our potential client companies, our audiences through this time, so that at every step of the way, your organization is there for them. Apart from just the overall situation, some governments have come up with rather comprehensive regulatory responses. So one of the governments who came up with quite comprehensive regulatory responses is the Malaysian government. Apart from just regulating the movement of people, they also set in place certain restrictions, certain guidelines as to how advertising, as to how marketing can be carried out, right? So apart from the Movement Control Order, or the MCO, the Malaysian government also advised businesses to ensure that any ads, any public service announcements or PSAs that are released online need to adhere to a defined set of restrictions and guidelines, right? So this is to maintain a responsible and ethical treatment of the solution, of the situation, to avoid, getting people into a panic, and of course, to maintaining the peace. right? Some of the guidelines as part of Malaysia's MCO were to companies were to be able were to ensure that they put out messages that contribute positively or constructively to the Malaysian government's management of the crisis and frontliners, right? Um, Another thing to note also for companies marketing to Malaysia was that to ensure that the terms and conditions of the promotions that they run during this period are clear and transparent, right, and upfront. So this is also a best practice outside of the coronavirus situation, but this was especially emphasized during this period, right? Malaysia's government also encouraged people to use honest and truthful claims about products and services, and to avoid spreading misinformation that originates from unreliable sources. So here in Singapore, we have POFMA, right, which regulates the whole epidemic of fake news that's going around online as well. Um, and in Malaysia, they also had a similar sort of regulation, right? And of course, they put up a whole series of content codes as well, advisories to allow businesses to refer to at any point in time, right? So apart from the governments, apart from our audiences, apart from even our competitors that we have analyzed so far, right? It is important to know that the intermediaries that we use, the digital platforms that we use, have also come up with their own regulatory responses to the situation. One example is Facebook, right? So for Facebook, as well as by extension Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, they have come up with a controversial content advertising policy, and COVID-19, or at least content that is related to the coronavirus, has been included as a very substantial section in that, right? So some things that we used to be able to do, some things that we used to be able to say, are now heavily regulated, heavily watched by Facebook. Some ads can potentially be banned outright, and even before they fly, right? So some of the product categories that are being controlled, or the content about certain product categories that are being controlled, include things like hand sanitizers, disinfectants, non-medical masks, right? These are temporary restrictions that have been put in place, right? So if you are a content marketer who has mentioned things like hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes, and non-medical masks, right, you may face certain restrictions, or you may even hit some brick walls when you are starting to put up your ads for these particular content pieces, right? Other things have been prohibited completely. So, and one example is COVID-19 test kits, right? As well as medical face masks. So you are unable to advertise for these things, or at least provide certain claims, because certain claims about their effects and their how trustworthy they can potentially be, right? So these are some of the changes, right? And there is a relatively fine line between what is accepted and what is not. So just because your competitor managed to run an ad for a similar product to yours doesn't necessarily mean that you are completely qualified for it, right? So examples are in the right column. You can take a look at that, right? So these are some potential brick walls that you may run into. Ad can't run because your website URL contains content that conflicts with Facebook's regulatory measures, right? So these are some of the brick walls and the roadblocks that content marketers may potentially face. This is, of course, put out and put in place for a good purpose, to avoid, to try and discourage organizations from taking advantage of the crisis, and to promote panic, to promote mass hysteria. And we need to be understanding about this. And of course, we need to be responsible in our content, right? Of course, at any point in time, you can always request that Facebook review your content after you have after you have changed and amended the ads to try and fit their regulatory requirements. Right. So one of the things that we as marketers are facing, as well as what everyone in the world is facing, is how situations are changing. So right now, at this point in time, at least over the past few months, we have seen conditions improve in the world, right? For our circuit breaker moved on into phase 2 with reopenings. We allowed the government started to allow F&B dine-in social gatherings of up to 5 people. There was even talk of phase 3 happening probably in the very near future, right? So there have been phased reopenings from lockdowns. Regulations are changing, laws are changing and adapting. New initiatives are also being introduced, like for example, the travel bubble, the Singapore-Hong Kong travel bubble. So ministers came out, announced the launch of the travel bubble, where people can finally start to travel again between Hong Kong and Singapore, right? Of course, some news outlets started putting out information to support this. Some brands, like for example, Interstellar Goods, which is a local startup that sells Kickstarter items, innovative Kickstarter items that has historically depended very heavily on items used for travel, have also reacted quickly and changed up their content to include travel items that fit the travel bubble, right? So being able to adapt to content, to react to changes in the situation quickly and effectively, right, and tastefully, of course, is a very good trait that is being exhibited by the marketers over at Interstellar Goods. However, if you are familiar, over the past couple of days, the Singapore-Hong Kong travel bubble has been delayed, right? So that caused a lot of disappointment among people because of and that has been delayed because of the rise in COVID cases over in Hong Kong. And for the people up north in Malaysia, their lockdown has been extended all the way to December 31st, right? So people are getting their hopes up. Companies are also getting their hopes up, and situations are changing. So it is a cliche, but change is the only constant. As marketers, we need to be prepared to adapt and adapt again, right? So please always ensure that all your content is kept up to date. That includes all your event listings, right? That includes all your content across all your platforms. Please do not neglect the platforms that you used to focus on in the past that you have sort of neglected over the past few months, right? Please go and check that all your content is up to date and reflects the nature of the rapidly evolving situation that we're currently in. While we all need to respond fast as content marketers, it is also important to be sensitive at the same time to your audience's needs, more importantly, their worries and priorities, such that we can come up with content in a very tasteful manner, right? We have seen also how some business owners have come clean with their encounters with the COVID-19 virus. So over in Bangkok, a Singaporean business owner who owns an F&B outlet contracted the COVID-19 virus. And he did a whole series of posts and announcements to try and keep his customers in the loop of the situation, try and reassure his customers of their safety, and to retain the trust that his outlet has managed to build among his customers over a long period of time, right? A lot of his information, a lot of the updates that he posted came across as very candid, very honest, and audiences were very supportive as well, right? And and of course, since then, his organization his outlet has opened up, and business is almost back to normal. Here in Singapore, the CEO of Lunch actually also contracted the virus, right? She posted on her own Facebook about the situation. About how she and her husband both contracted the virus. She posted on Facebook also about the experiences that she had in recovering from the virus here in Singapore, right? So that apart from that, being an open sort of reflection on how our government and our frontline workers are handling the situation, right? It also reflects well on the organization in being transparent and being truthful as well. So she also gave some interviews to certain publications, and it shows that the organization has nothing to hide, right? As for governments are also putting out content to try and help populations through this crisis. The Singapore government has placed extreme emphasis on getting people upskilled and employed, right? So helpful content that it puts out include interstitial ads like this on Straits Times, right? It also includes some of the other articles and how-to articles, which we'll go through in a bit. The community has also pulled together to try and support certain sectors that have been suffering because of the circuit breaker period, right? So hawkers, for example, Hawkers United was a whole community on Facebook that came together to try and support hawkers, to try and showcase certain hawkers who have yet to up their marketing game, right? And of course, here in Singapore, some brands have also started to put out ads as well. So this is one ad by StarHub. Let's take a look at it. So that was a piece of good content that was put out by StarHub, trying to recognize the efforts by frontline workers, by even the average man on the street, right? Singtel also put out a similar one, but unfortunately we're running a bit short on time, so we'll be skipping through this. So what has been noticed by consumers and also some journalists is that there has been a whole influx of these ads, right? So naturally, when the coronavirus situation took over, and when companies are trying to adapt to staying relevant, to building and maintaining that relationship with their customers, the knee-jerk reaction is to come up with ads like that because, and also all in a very similar format because of the lockdowns, because people are not able to interact as they used to be able to. Production teams are not able to shoot ads as they used to be able to. And so a lot of what has been said all at the same time by different companies, probably not a coordinated response, but a lot of different organizations being said at the same time, can potentially come across as insensitive or offensive by certain people, right? So earlier we spoke about how people's attitudes have changed, and even with encouraging messages, with good intentions being put out, there is still the off chance that some people may react to them negatively, right? So we need to be very careful about that. As marketers, we also cannot afford to be discouraged when our best efforts are met with aggressive or negative reactions. Oops, apologies. And it is very important for us to also ensure that we do not conflict our important messages with the overall situation, right? So these are some of the ads that were put up by the Breast Cancer Foundation here in Singapore. You may have seen them in some of the elevators. And what you noticed is that what some people noticed is that the messaging was a bit confusing, right? Because the Breast Cancer Foundation tried to play on the whole lockdown situation, the whole circuit breaker situation where people are not leaving the house, and yet at the same time, because regular checkups are required for women to ensure that they are in good health, the Breast Cancer Foundation tried to encourage people to step out of the house to go and, get themselves checked out. And somehow the copywriting didn't really translate very well. Could be because of the trying to force that connection. Certain celebrities here in Singapore didn't react very well as well, and and quite understandably so, right? So one of the good things about how the Breast Cancer Foundation managed to respond to that is that they took the chance to clarify about the message that they were trying to put out to build trust once again, right? And of course, to still spread their message and not allow this to dampen, the message that they're trying to put out. So it's important to not just listen, but to also respond whenever you see people reacting to your posts and to your content. So what is the new normal in content marketing? To sum up, essentially, there's a heightened level of uncertainty with a lower level of trust because of the situation that we are in. As organizations, as businesses, as marketers, as business owners, we need to build trust with our content. A lot of it can be done in terms of coming up with useful, relevant content that adds value to our audiences, right? So this builds the level of trust and authority. Engage with our customers, hear from them, right? Build up your database of trusted reviews. If you didn't have time or bandwidth to build up your reviews, to focus on your customers in the past because you were just about selling, now's the time. With reduced demand, this is the time to fortify your base, right? Another thing to note is that just because there's a higher internet usage doesn't necessarily mean that there's a higher level of spending. It's very important to optimize your marketing processes, use remarketing, retargeting to help with drop-offs, with abandoned carts. It's also important to note that some consumers who are maybe misinformed, right, may be turning immediately to certain solutions that come to their mind. It's important that we try and use content in an understandable manner, in a clear manner, right, that appeals both emotionally and rationally to these customers to influence and guide their decisions, right? And when they respond, try and be as alert as possible and be as patient as possible, right? A lot of the content that you used to plan in the past that you had scheduled for now is probably, it may be irrelevant. It may need a very thorough review, right? So please take note of that. It's also important to know that production timelines may potentially lengthen because of delays in shipping and things like that. You may want to start to collaborate with relevant online vendors who already have an existing user base of online customers. Live streaming is also potentially another thing that you may want to start to embrace, right? And put more emphasis on tracking your data, right? Tracking customer behavior, looking at how they're using their media platforms, looking at how they're spending, and also consider going direct to customer, right? It's very important not to resort to knee-jerk reactions. Always ensure that your content marketing aligns with your mid to long-term business goals, and also try and engage as meaningfully as you can to build that long-term relationship with your customers, right? So try to avoid short-term tactics, even though there's the strong urge to, right? So as for internally, organizations need to be very aware about the content they put out to their own employees, build that sense of belonging, be transparent, and build that trust as well, right? And always show concern and care frequently because you never know what your employees are currently going through. So some key takeaways from today, we're almost out of time, is to first of all, build trust, build long-term relationships with your customers through transparency, through getting them involved with user-generated content. Always monitor your content's performance, emphasize the optimization of paid campaigns because you need to get more out of your marketing budget, right? Ensure that you align your marketing content to your long-term or at least mid-term business objectives because they are always changing and they are ever changing. And always ensure that your content is kept simple, understandable, unique so that it stands out from the crowd, meaningful so that it's retained, and up to date so that it's relevant with the changing world. Right. So just like to thank some of the organizations that have given their feedback and contributed to the content today. So Rose Wan from Lunch actually, Jonathan Shen from the Golden Duck, and Benjamin Arianto from Grimm and Company. So if you're interested to learn a bit more about how you can use Google Ads, especially in this time, I'm running a search engine marketing bootcamp in December, right? So please go check it out. The link is over here below, so you can go and check that out. And there is funding. It is SkillsFuture subsidized. And for more inquiries, you can always drop my colleague Najib an email as well. So I believe that is all that I have for now. Thank you so much. Yes, so let's take a look at some of the questions that have come up. Okay. Let me get a drink of water. So someone has asked, with so many people jumping onto the live streaming bandwagon, do you think it is overused? Like how we see several businesses going live at the same time? I think it is important. Okay, so one of the benefits of live streaming is that at least for now, your existing subscribers, your existing followers would potentially get a notification on their device, on their mobile phone, even if they're not on YouTube, on Facebook or whatever, when you go live, right? So this is a good way for you to, a good and free way for you to reach out to your target audiences and interact live with them without having to pay for ads, you see, and make use of your existing database, right? So why we potentially encourage live streaming is because, first of all, it is not paid potentially. You don't have to pay for it. And you would get that sort of, you'll be able to interact with people who are very interested in your business. So whether or not other companies are doing it at the same time is probably because they are also trying to make full use of that sort of resource that they already have built in the past, right? So it really depends on how your audiences are interacting with you. And it's also important to note how your audiences actually interact with you through live streaming. There's no harm trying, but more importantly, if during the live streaming process, it's very important to collect the feedback, look at the comments, look at the responses, look at how that has contributed to sales, track how that contributes to sales and your digital marketing objectives. Right. Next question is, I think there are two questions that are quite similar. What industry uses content marketing, where to get statistics or data for content marketing of our target audiences. And with intensified sponsored content marketing, how can businesses differ and stand out from the content clutter? One important resource to look at is Google Trends as well as Google Ads Keyword Planner. These are two platforms where you can go and investigate and find out a bit more about what people are actually searching for, the user intent in the market, what people are actually searching for. So if you look at, it's important as well if you're using Google Ads Keyword Planner to be able to look at the more recent searches, right? Because it averages it out on a monthly basis over the past year, right? So it is it's very important for you to find out what people are searching for, to focus on the user intent, right? Focus on the user intent and adapt to the user intent, right? So that's how you can potentially stand out from the rest of the crowd by being super relevant in your content, the keywords that people are searching for. Right, so that is how you may want to stand out. That's one way that you can find more information and more data to guide your, or at least focus, right, your content marketing efforts. Right. Next question is the course online or classroom based? I think for now, it should be online for now, depending on whether the restrictions open up eventually, we may try to run it via Classroom. But of course, those who are registered will be able to take a look at the, will be updated along the way, right? So yes, thanks for asking. When we do, okay, next question that I'm being asked is when we do Facebook Live, we do create better engagements. Conversely, when we do Facebook ads, it seems like the results, especially on uptake and consumption, is pretty low. Is it worth to keep putting the Facebook ads over the long run? Good question, Darren. One of the things that you need to take note of, especially when you're running ads on Facebook, is that Facebook ads are guided primarily by objectives, right? So the objectives are dependent on the sort of results that you try to, you should select your objectives based on the results that you're trying to achieve. And if a lot of companies make the mistake of going for things like engagement, going for objectives like engagement, right, which basically makes Facebook show your ads to people who are more likely to click, more likely to like, share, and comment or react, rather than click into your website and potentially buy. So it's very important for you to ensure that your objectives are being tracked. Ensure that your Facebook pixel is installed on your website so they can attribute the success of your campaigns to the sales on your website, so the success of your campaigns. And of course, A/B testing is also a very good way for you to get the most out of your ad campaigns. Sure, yes, because Facebook Live happens in a very limited time period, because you're only live for a certain period of time. That creates a sense of FOMO, right? Where people go online, oh, I don't want to miss out on what this brand or this person is saying right or covering right now online. So naturally, there's a bit more engagement, a bit more during the period of time. So a good thing to put into your Facebook ads as well is a time limited factor, right? If an offer lasts for a certain period of time, ensure that you emphasize that it's only available for a certain period of time so that people react faster, right? Rather than, that's why some companies do not advertise for their Christmas ads, for their Christmas promotions until maybe about the start of December, right? Because they don't want to lose their customers or interest over time. They want customers to act immediately. So if you're running Facebook ads over a long period of time, call to action very important. Optimize with A/B testing, and before anything else, ensure that the right objective is selected, because it heavily determines how your ads are being shown to your target audiences. Right. Oh yeah, I'm being told to mention that the default training mode for NIAN, short courses at least, is online, digital webinars, right? Unless otherwise stated. So please always refer back to your sign up page if you are signing up for any courses with NIAN for more details. Right. Can live streaming generate, do we have time for one more question? Yep, so can live streaming generate sales? Is live streaming more for sales conversion or more brand product awareness? Wow, it really depends on the skill and the planning of your live streaming host, really, right? Good question. We have seen sales really take off for live streamers, right? There was the S Hook Jie, right? Which is one of the local live streamers who really took off by the way she sold just a simple metal hook on Facebook Live. Live streaming can generate sales. It does create, it sort of gamifies the experience, especially for Facebook Live auctions, because you're trying to outbid the next person and you can see the comments go in the thread. So it does create also that time sensitivity with the countdown timer, and that also helps to generate sales. Of course, you need to weigh the facts, you need to weigh the effectiveness of it. And after the live stream is over, maybe you want to also include a link where users can also follow up and view the item on your site to buy it if they happen to miss it during the auction. Yeah. And of course, the brand product awareness, it helps to maintain the top of mind brand or product awareness with those push notifications among your subscriber database, as mentioned earlier. Yep, so I think that's all the time we have. I think I'll pass the time back to Belle.